Parents, you cannot expect the schools to fix the problem. If you are a parent of a child who is struggling in school, whether in a specific content or in behavior or in processing or anything that's affecting school or even social, you cannot expect the schools to fix a problem because they can't. They don't have the capacity, they don't have the training, they don't know how to do it. You cannot assume that is their job. Their job is to feed your child content. Their job is to teach them how to read and how to do math and how to do the academics. But the problem is that the children are coming in the last couple decades, and it's getting worse and worse. Even in the last 5 years, it's horrendously worse. They are coming to school ill-prepared, not because of the parent's fault, but because the child is being affected by all the toxins from society. It is a problem with our modern society. It is not necessarily a problem of anything that you are doing specifically, but it's a big change that the schools have not figured out and the schools are not equipped to handle. If you have a child who is in elementary school, especially if they're under the age of 14, I know elementary school goes up to about 12, but if they're under 14, you have to get them now, because once they hit about 15 years old, especially if they're a boy, they really tend to become very resistant to any kind of therapies or changes or anything that you want to do, especially the parent. They tend to be a little more receptive at school, but they become very resistant to anything that you're going to do. So if you're going to do anything, if you have a child who is like 12 and under, you are still in the sweet spot and you have all the ability to make the changes that is needed. But the changes that is needed isn't going to be what you think. It's not what the schools can provide. And if you wait, the child, depending on what their issue is, but especially if there's kind of like ADD, ADHD type of thing going on, what they're going to do is they're going to self-medicate, okay? I'm telling you from experience, right? They're going to self-medicate. They might drop out unless you can really pull them across that finish line, which a lot of parents have to do. I had to do that with one of my kids. They're going to struggle for the rest of their life to get a job, to maintain a job. They're going to be self-sabotaging themselves the whole time. And you don't see, if they're 9 years old, I remember I had a fourth grader, and when I worked with him, I saw my son who was in high school. He was almost about to graduate, who was severely struggling, but I completely saw him in him. Like, I go, oh my gosh, this kid is going to turn into my son. But, you know, his mom just really couldn't grasp that, or couldn't really see that, or maybe I didn't make it urgent enough for her. I am trying to plead with parents that this is not a school responsibility, this is a parent responsibility, and I'm going to tell you why. So first of all, there is what I call it a learning ladder, for lack of a better term, or a staircase. And at the top of the staircase is the academics, or maybe I should better say the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is the academics and the behaviors and all of the things that the child is expressing. It's what's visible in the child, you know, whether they're doing well in school or whether they're not doing well in school. That's the top, the academics and the behavior, what's visible. Underneath that iceberg, underneath the water, what we can't see, the invisible part, that is the brain and all the connections that the brain is making. The brain develops from the bottom up, the bottom being the brain stem. When we are born, we are able to breathe. Our heartbeat is automatic. All the automatic stuff is in the brain stem, and that part develops first, and eventually through movements and through rhythmic movements and primitive reflex integration, the babies are able to develop some postural stability, some muscle tone, postural stability, neck stability, then eye stability, and on top of that, cognition. So when you have a child who is floppy, you are going to notice that the floppy muscle tone makes weak brain waves, okay? Floppy muscle tone makes weak neck reflexes. You're going to have poor visual reflexes and poor visual systems. And if you have poor visual systems, what's going to happen? They're not going to be able to read, right? It's going to be really hard. They're going to have a struggle with reading. And then on top of that, all the cognitive stuff, that is like the memory and the processing and all of that goes on top. So and part of that ladder or part of that iceberg are things like sensory integration, knowing your left from your right, being able to see in 3 dimensions. There's so many things that children used to come to school at 5 completely all wired up and completely prepared. Why? Because they went outside and they were playing they would climb a tree, right? They'd play outside, they'd make stuff, they'd build blocks, and they'd look at 3 dimensions, and they were experiencing the world. They used all of their senses. Your brain stem develops and your brain connects with your senses, by touching and by seeing and by hearing and by smelling and by tasting. And that's why babies are licking things all the time and they're touching things all the time. So the children aren't doing that anymore for a lot of reasons. I mean, in a lot of areas, it's probably not even safe to be outside, right? And then we have all the technology. And then on top of that, we have all the toxins, and their brain stems have kids who are really hypersensitive. You have to think of heavy metals and mercury in the brain and aluminum, like different metals that are in the brainstem, because that hypersensitivity is in the brain. That's a brainstem thing. And it's also low nourishment, and it's not because you're not feeding them, but even if you fed them a completely 100% organic diet, their digestive system, for the most part, especially in our kids with, on the spectrum, whether they're ADHD, ASD, or whatever, their digestive systems are thrashed. My 2 kids, when they were little, they just had terrible digestive systems, and that was the first thing that we had to remediate, because your gut and your brain mirror each other, and if your gut is unwell, your brain is unwell. So what happens is when your digestive system is terrible, then it's not being able to break down the food that it is eating. So the proteins can't be broken down all the way into the amino acids, because protein's like a Lego set, like a little mini Lego set. And then when you eat, you're digesting it, and you need to break it apart into all the tiny little Lego pieces. And then your body reconstructs those Lego pieces into new proteins that your body actually utilizes. So you're eating a piece of meat, you're breaking it all down, and then you're reconstructing it. Well, a lot of these kids can't do that. Their guts are thrashed because of glyphosate. Glyphosate is sprayed on almost all of our foods. It's almost impossible. It's very nearly impossible to not be consuming glyphosate. So we need to do things to get rid of the glyphosate, but that is just thrashing our system. It is sprayed on all of our food. What else could be the microbes and all kind of dysbiosis. So a lot of times we might be exposed to microbes, but they should be able to be flushed out of our body. But if we have this dysbiosis going on, then they set up shop, if you will. And then all of that starts creating, that intestinal lining becomes permeable. We get like holes in there, and then the proteins that we're not breaking down go through. Our immune system starts to flare up, and it activates the immune system, and then that goes to your brain. So if your gut has inflammation, your brain has inflammation, and every cognitive issue, whether it's OCD or Alzheimer's or ADHD or brain fog or whatever, it is a root of brain inflammation. And we have microglial cells in the brain. Those are our immune cells in the brain, and then they light up. And there are some metals and some chemicals that, like mercury, easily crosses through the blood-brain barrier. So some toxins, the blood-brain barrier is supposed to protect the brain from toxins, but when the gut is permeable, the blood-brain barrier is permeable, and all these toxins can go through and just light the brain on fire. So if you are taking your child to a therapist or to a tutor, the schools, let's say you're a teacher and your schools are saying, okay, we're going to start at kindergarten and we're going to start teaching them to read younger. We're going to do all this academic work. First of all, the therapies in the world isn't going to really help, or it's not going to stick if the brain is on fire, because what that is like, cleaning out the refrigerator while your house is on fire. So your house is burning down, but you're trying to clean out the refrigerator, which is all the, the Read 180, math tutoring, reading tutoring, whatever it is that you're trying to do, your house is on fire. So we have to think of all the things, why, all the reasons that we have inflammation. So part of it was what I said, because of the glyphosate and other toxins, and gluten. Gluten is a big one. And one of the reasons is because the gluten today, the wheat today, is not the same as the wheat from a long time ago. It's been GMO'd, it's sprayed. So the, wheat and then processed foods and hydrogenated oils and all of the junk and the colors and the dyes and they're picking on the food coloring for a good reason. But they need to be picking on, making sure that they're equally picking on every single other chemical that is in our food, because it is causing havoc in our digestive system. So probably most everyone watching right now is going, you know what, yeah, I don't have the most perfect digestive system. And some people, it becomes really sluggish. When it becomes sluggish, the toxins can't get out and it starts to recirculate. So then we have toxins that are recirculating and it causes more immune things. We have viruses and parasites and bacteria, all of the pathogens and infections. So a lot of people don't realize that they're walking around with all of these infections inside of their body. In fact, just me today, I do a lot of lab testing. I've been doing a lot of lab testing on myself. I've done some like a long time ago. And I realized, because I still have something going on, but I'm really in tune to my body, and I realized something's going on, and I finally realized that I still have an underlying infection that could have been from who knows way back when. It could have been from COVID, but it could have been from when I was a kid and I always got ear infections. Who knows from what, but you have these chronic infections that are leading to brain inflammation. And then those proteins that go through that are so inflammatory to our system, those cause food sensitivities, So we have food sensitivities because now that we are, now that the immune system has marked certain foods, every time we eat them, it just flares right up. And then we get sensitivities like autoimmune. I don't know, there's a little bit debate on how this mechanism works, but technically, they say that autoimmune is when the body basically is reacting to certain, the immune system is activated by certain foreign proteins, like something that shouldn't be in your body, like a toxin, a chemical, or whatever. And then there's a part of that, like let's say gluten, and a gluten peptide goes through the blood, but your thyroid actually looks very much like that gluten peptide, and your cerebellum in different parts, and your basal ganglia. Basal ganglia is huge in ADHD. So there's certain parts of your brain that look like that gluten peptide. So if you have a leaky gut and you're leaking all that gluten and your body is like reacting to it, it is basically going to attack thyroid, Hashimoto's, or cerebellum, which is coordination and balance, or basal ganglia, which is attention or other coordination or balance motor issues as well, Parkinson's too. So that's one whole problem, okay? So I'm trying to tell you parents that this is not a school problem. What is going on with your child is a biochemical problem. So as soon as my son, I have a son that when he was getting diagnosed, once I kind of figured out, I let the schools do whatever it was going to do, because I was, as an educator, I was doing things in the house, but I was going to let the schools do whatever they're going to do, and I was going to figure out this whole biochemical thing. And I'm going to tell you, it is not a quick fix. It's a long journey. For some of you, it could be just like a simple thing, like you need to really address the methylation pathway. Methylation is huge for kids on ADHD and the spectrum. I finally realized that we all have like methylation issues. I didn't even realize that until maybe a couple years ago. But methylation, to address that, you need things like methylated B12 and methylfolate, but your cells, the cells are not functioning properly. The cells are toxic. The cells are not communicating correctly. And the schools are not going, the only thing that the schools can do is the schools can help the child compensate for their deficits. And that was why I left the schools, because I was so frustrated as a learning specialist being in an IEP meeting, and they would list all the things, they would test the child and they would list all the, 12% visual memory, working memory, or visual processing skills, or whatever that they had. And it was so frustrating because I was trying, I wanted to say, you can fix this problem, right? Because all of these things can be fixed. If you put out the fire, and you address the inflammation. So maybe you have to remove foods. Maybe you need to address the infections. Maybe you need to do whatever you need to do to reduce the inflammation. And so you need to detox as a part of that, because if you don't detox, then get the metals out. So you want to get the pathogens out. But you might need to kill pathogens, but you also might need to remove chemicals and heavy metals, mercury and aluminum and all. They love fat. They store themselves in fat, and your brain is a big ball of fat, and that's why it's so problematic with your brain, because they're stored in there, and it's really hard to test, because when you're testing blood, it's not necessarily in your blood, it's not necessarily in your urine, unless you provoke it, unless you take something that kind of makes it come out, and then you can kind of catch a little bit. You can catch sometimes in your hair, but it's really hard because your body isn't really excreting it. It's holding on to it inside the fat cells, and your brain is a bunch of fat cells. And so you need to get that out, and you need to make sure you're nourishing your brain. There is a book, I think I have right here, right behind me. Oh, right here. There's a book right here. This was like the second book I ever read. It was called, well, not in my life, but it's called Children with Starving Brains. I guess maybe that's backwards. Sorry about that. But it's by Dr. McCandless. And the title says it all. Because all of our children, their issue is that their brains are undernourished. Goes back to what I said in the beginning, that it doesn't matter if you're feeding them the best organic diet. If they cannot break it down, and if they cannot absorb it because their gut is a mess, then those nutrients are not getting to their brain. So we need to address the nutrients. We need to give them nutrient-dense food. We need to give them amino acids, like not even the proteins. Sometimes we need to just give them straight to the amino acids. I think 𝐬𝐜𝐽 was one that it's like a juice form, and it's just pure amino acids, so that children can start making proteins that they need. They need to be mineralized, okay? Everybody on the planet Earth is probably under mineralized. My hair mineral analysis I just got, my minerals were in the very low of the normal range, and I was really surprised because I've been mineralizing so much, and so that means I've been I need to work. That also means that there were some underlying issues. I told you about that infection. I think that's kind of what's stirring the pot a little bit, but we are under mineralized. Every single cell uses minerals. The cell wall uses, we have the calcium, we have the sodium potassium pump and the calcium ion channel, and every single cell needs minerals. And if they don't, those heavy metals actually bond on the mineral site. We have lead, loves the calcium spots, right? And we have, off the top of my head, I don't know which one, different metals compete with different minerals. So if there's not enough minerals, the metals are going to be there. So one of the ways to get the metals out is to flood the body with minerals to kind of push them out so they can go back to their own binding sites. And then after we're nourished, and we have to work on during all of this, work on how are we going to help the nervous system. Now, the schools, there are techniques that can be done in schools to help kids kind of regulate a little bit. Brain gym is really good. It was meant for groups and classrooms and schools. It's also meant one-on-one, so a lot of parents take brain gym. But we need to do things that help kids regulate their nervous system. But when you nourish the body, the nervous system starts to regulate on its own, because part of the reason is it's not getting the minerals it needs. It's not getting the B vitamins that it needs. And so we need to be working on balancing and regulating that nervous system, and primarily from a biochemical point of view, but then you can also do things like with movement therapies and teaching the child to sit quietly or doing heavy exercise and all of that kind of stuff. And then at the end, then that's where your therapies come in, because at the end of the day, if you have a child who's 14, because this is what happened. Yesterday, I assessed a 14-year-old child who has been struggling in math, and he's about a second grade level. And the teacher kind of came up with the parent, and she's just kind of looking like, what to do. But what happens is, and I was telling her, if you can be doing all of these therapies and working, but if this child's house is still on fire, you're just cleaning out that refrigerator. But at the end, if you have a 14-year-old, they might have missed a lot of content. So you might need to go back and do a lot of remediation. But by then, the systems should be more ready to receive the instruction. For example, I worked with a couple as in like a brother and a sister, not a husband and wife, but a brother and a sister. The brother was in 6th grade and the sister was in 3rd grade, and she was in reading. He was in my math program. He was a lot more involved, but she was getting reading support. And the mom was coming in after school, and they were both, so we're tag teaming, and I was telling the mom, okay, you do this while I'm doing this over here. And the girl in a couple months, I don't know, maybe 1-2 months, she got let off the caseload of the reading. So once her body was just integrated, and her mom was feeding them better and everything, then her visual system and everything just kind of came on track. So with the reading, she didn't really have to really catch up on anything. But if things start to click and you're in math, for example, you might have to go back and now start really to fill in the gaps. But don't try to do all these therapies unless you're first trying to address all the brain inflammation, all the detox, all the nourishment, the nervous system regulation, get the body, because it is not like 50 years ago. If you have not noticed, if you are a mother who has a young child, you might be, let's say maybe you're 35, maybe you're under 40. If you're under 40, especially if you're under 35, you might think having anxiety is normal. It is not normal for people to have anxiety. It is not normal for people to have allergies, or a lot, like allergies to peanuts. Like when I grew up, nobody had, food allergies. Nobody had food allergies. Sometimes people might have been allergic to dogs and cats and grass. Okay, those were the allergies that we had when I grew up. But it is not normal to have anxiety. It's not normal to have any of these things. So I just really want you to realize that something out there has happened to our society and is happening to our kids, and you need to be aware of it. And it's a combination of the technology. It's a combination of a lot of it is all the poisons they're putting in our food. And that's probably the biggest part of it. The technology, the role the technology has is that it's preventing the kids from going outside and playing, because it's giving them that instantaneous dopamine, and it's rewiring our brain the way that people are consuming content. And we have the Wi-Fi and the EMF. I mean, that's a whole nother thing. The Wi-Fi affects our calcium ion channel of our cells. Every single cell has a calcium ion channel, and the Wi-Fi affects that and is messing with our DNA. Okay, so my house right now, like this, I'm on an iPad right now. I don't know if it'll reach. I don't know if you can see it. It's plugged in. I have Ethernet in my house. My phone is on Ethernet, and my iPad is on Ethernet, my computers are on Ethernet, everything is on Ethernet, and I have the Wi-Fi turned off. Now, obviously, I can get signal from my neighbors, but your signal in your house is the strongest thing. So when you go to bed, your Wi-Fi should be off. You should not be sleeping with any device at all in your bedroom. That's a whole nother conversation. But the point of this video is to impose upon parents that please, because I was so frustrated, not just yesterday, but I'm frustrated in general when I go to schools or when I was teaching in schools, and the parents have this mentality that the schools are going to fix their kids. Teachers, I was a teacher for 25 years. I was a math coach, so I was a math coach, so I taught teachers. I taught at the university in the teacher ed program, and I can guarantee you, and I was a learning specialist, I can guarantee you teachers don't know unless they have sought this out on their own like I did, because there are teachers that have done that all by themselves. The schools and the system at large in education, especially public education, is not teaching the teachers about brain development, about the fact that you should not reward children with candy because you are poisoning them. When you go into the lunch, when I was substituting sometimes in special ed classrooms, and these children who need to have the most pristine diet, they were every single thing on their plate. I would tell the aides, I said, you know what, not only isn't there anything helping them, every single ingredient on this plate is harming them. You have to realize the importance that diet plays. I will put it in the description. I have a ebook on how foods affect learning, mood, and behavior, and so I put that together because I wanted to make it like a presentation for teachers so they realize that they do have a role. When I was teaching, if we had like a party, I didn't allow children to bring sodas. I didn't allow them to bring anything that was kind of like junky, and I personally would never give that out to my kids because I choose not to poison kids. If I was when I was substituting, sometimes a teacher had like a stash of candy that they wanted like to use as a reward. And like, I remember in this one 6th grade class, and the kids were like, oh yeah, the teacher, lets us have whatever. I said, well, you know what? That's not mine to, I would just pretend I didn't know that she gave me permission. I just said, that's not mine to give. And besides, I don't give anything that's poisoning to kids, or, it depends on how old or what kind of kids that they are, that they can handle that. But usually I just say, it's not mine to give, and I'm going to choose not to give it. And it's so ironic that we are so allowed to give out candy, and like at parties, everything has to be packaged and processed and whatever, because now they don't want you to, like in the district where I live, they made it like everything has to be passed up, it has to be processed. Well, that means it has a lot of chemicals and it has additives and preservatives and everything. But heaven forbid if we gave out maybe some fruit or anything that was healthy, or a vitamin or omega-3, anything that's going to actually help the brain, right? So we're living in this type of society. So as a parent, you have to realize just getting learning support is not enough. It is not enough. You as a parent have to realize that you didn't do anything. It wasn't your fault. It's everything else is being done to us. But now you have to be aware, and you have to wake up, and you have to realize, I have the responsibility to fix my kid and nobody else. Now I can go and I can say, I want to have this and this done, and there's people out there that can help you do that, but you have to do your homework. Now I can help you, guide you. I know every book that's out there, every therapy that's out there, whatever, blood test, like if you need any kind of analysis, any kind of assessment, whatever, I can either point you in the right direction, I can either help you myself, but you have to do it. And the biggest thing is the reason why lately, if you've noticed, if any of you have been following me, you notice that I've been speaking more to adults than children. A long time ago, I wasn't speaking to children, but speaking to parents. I'm speaking to now more like people my age who are going kicking and screaming and don't want to go the dementia route. That's because I would be working with children, but the parents wouldn't take my advice, and when they would go home, they wouldn't follow through. And if they're not following through on the supplementation and the diet and all of that, again, they're letting that house burn down, and the refrigerator is still on fire. So anyway, I had a whole bunch of notes. I didn't even follow any of them. Probably there's things that I would love to share, but let's see. I think at the end, though, I was just going to. But by the way, as far as myself, I mean, if you know me, but otherwise, I taught for 25 years. I was a coach. I taught at the university. I was a learning specialist. I left the schools because I was so frustrated because I couldn't do what needed to be done in order to actually help kids. Because my goal wasn't to put Band-Aid on children. My goal was to help kids become functional, like help kids not have their problems anymore. I don't want to say I wanted to fix them, but if they were struggling with something, I didn't want to just give them a way to compensate for their problem. I wanted them just to not have that problem anymore. I have 3 children. My oldest he still has severe ADD. He's 26. He struggled his whole life. I pulled him across the finish line. And if you want to know what that looks like in kindergarten, it would take us 2 hours for him to copy 2 sentences for homework, and it was tears. I would have to help him do, I would sit with him and help him do every single little project that he ever had growing up. Paper in high school. Make sure that he had his paper in his backpack before he left, and then like 3 weeks later find out he had a 0 because he never turned it in. It was just excruciating, his attention. He didn't have that hyperactivity at all. It was just a right brain issue, not a left brain. ADHD is more left brain and ADD is more right. And then my second is autistic, moderate to severely. His language is extremely impaired. He totally rewired his brain when he was little. But for both of them, we had to fix their guts when they were little. They both had really mushy stools, and they had a lot of dysbiosis, and we had to help fix their bodies. And then by the time I knew what to do movement-wise and other therapies, and because way back then, even the nutritional stuff was they were still just kind of wrapping their heads around that. By the time I really knew what to do, that needed effort on my son's part. He was in high school and he was he didn't want to be fixed or whatever. But what's he like now? He's been back home 3 times. He's 26. He's been back home. He can't hold down a job. He can kind of hold down a job. Not really. He's not really holding down a job. And he can't get anything beyond fast food or whatever just because he's self-sabotaging. He's really smart, actually. He's smart, but he's just self-sabotaging. And it's basically like saying, okay, when you're ready to really fix yourself, then you know that you just have to ask. So he's sort of taking little baby steps on his own, but baby steps, it's like if your house is on fire, if you just kind of swat at a little part of the house or maybe you put a little blanket on a part of the house, maybe that one flame went down, but your house is still on fire. You really need to overhaul it in a huge, big way. If you happen to be a teacher, if you're a parent, you can forward this to a teacher. If you happen to be a teacher and you were just watching for the entertainment aspect of this or whatever, I do have a course on helping your struggling students. So if you are interested on understanding all of this about your struggling student, I do have a course, and it's worth 2 credits to the University of San Diego. So if you need credits, it's a great course to take, and it's online, self-paced, and you just email me, and I give you feedback, and we're in personal communication. And it's actually pretty inexpensive. But and my youngest son, so I'm kind of jumping around because I wasn't using my notes. My youngest son was a preemie. He was born 5 weeks early, and he had developmental issues because of that. And we're finally, he's 17 years old, but I think he's kind of finally worked out of most of that. But we have been doing a lot of biochemical stuff. We've done a lot of different kind of things, but primarily we have to focus on the nutrition and everything that's going on. And the problem that you're going to have is once they're 18 or whatever, they're going to go out into life and they're going to have to make their own food choices, and it's going to be really hard because it's going to be inflammation all over again unless you start it early and it's really kind of solid and set. So I hope that this video was more of a passion, because I just met with this family and I was just kind of frustrated and remembering about all these parents that I had seen in the past that just really felt like that the schools had a responsibility, and it would be logical to think that, but I just wanted it tell parents that the schools aren't going to do what you think that they're going to do, or they're not going to do what actually needs to be done, and what you think needs to be done is actually different than what actually needs to be done. So just check out my other videos. I have tons and tons of content. Email me, message me. If you have any questions, I'm here for you, but we need to do this together, and I just wanted you to know what I knew that you didn't know. Okay? All right. Bye.